That Tuesday afternoon, when I rushed to St. Mary's Hospital to sign what I thought were comfort care papers for my dying sister, I believed I was making the hardest decision any sister could face. But when I arrived at the ICU and reached for the pen, a young nurse grabbed my wrist and whispered with genuine terror in her eyes, "Don't sign anything. Please, just trust me. In 10 minutes, you'll understand why." I froze, looking between her frightened face and my brother-in-law, Garrett, standing on the other side of the bed, his smile just a little too eager. I had no idea that exactly 10 minutes later, I would be watching security footage that would turn my entire world upside down, or that the woman I'd spent 6 decades loving and protecting was about to become a murder victim not from her illness, but from the 2 people standing closest to her bedside. Before I dive deeper into this nightmare, let me ask you something. Have you ever had that gut feeling that something was terribly wrong, but everyone around you insisted you were overreacting? Drop a comment below and tell me about it, because that instinct might just save someone's life. And if this story resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support helps me bring you more true stories that need to be told. It had started 3 days earlier with a phone call that shattered my quiet retirement morning. Garrett's voice was shaking when he told me that my baby sister Lorraine had collapsed at home and was now on life support. Brain aneurysm, he said. The doctors weren't hopeful. She was only 58, vibrant and healthy the last time I'd seen her just 2 weeks ago at our monthly lunch. We'd laughed about getting older, about her plans to finally take that trip to Italy she'd been dreaming about for years. And now Garrett was telling me she might never wake up. I'd driven through the night from my home in Ohio to the hospital in Nashville, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. Lorraine and I had been inseparable growing up. After our parents died young, we only had each other. I'd helped raise her when I was barely an adult myself. I'd walked her down the aisle when she married Garrett 15 years ago, a successful investment banker who seemed to adore her, who bought her the big house she'd always wanted, who promised to take care of her forever. When I finally got to her hospital room at 2 in the morning, Garrett was there, red-eyed and devastated, or so it seemed. He hugged me, told me the doctors said there was no brain activity, that Lorraine would want to go peacefully, with dignity. He'd already started talking about arrangements, about how she'd always said she didn't want to be kept alive by machines. I was too shocked, too grief-stricken to question any of it. I just held my sister's hand, still warm, and sobbed. The next 2 days passed in a blur of doctors with sympathetic faces, Garrett making phone calls about funeral homes, and me sitting by Lorraine's bedside watching the machines breathe for her. But something gnawed at me, little things that didn't quite fit. The doctors never made direct eye contact when they talked about her prognosis. Garrett kept pushing for me to sign the DNR order to authorize removing life support, always with this urgency that felt off. And there was this woman, younger, probably in her 30s, who kept appearing at odd hours, standing close to Garrett, touching his arm in a way that seemed too familiar. When I asked Garrett who she was, he said quickly, "Oh, that's Jocelyn. She's a grief counselor the hospital assigned to us. She's been such a help." But grief counselors don't usually wear designer handbags or look at a patient's husband the way she looked at Garrett. On that Tuesday afternoon, Garrett called me at my hotel. His voice had a strange brightness to it. "Felicity, I think it's time. I know this is hard, but Lorraine wouldn't want this. The doctors say we should make the decision today. I have the papers ready. Can you come now?" Every cell in my body screamed that something was wrong, but I couldn't articulate what. I'd been a nurse myself for 40 years before retiring. I knew how these situations worked. Sometimes families had to make impossible choices. I told myself I was just in denial, that I couldn't accept losing my sister. When I walked into Lorraine's room at 3:30, Garrett was there with Jocelyn, who wasn't bothering to pretend to be a grief counselor anymore. She stood proprietarily close to him, and when I entered, they both turned with identical expressions that I can only describe as anticipation. On the bedside table was a stack of papers, a pen placed on top. Garrett started his spiel immediately. "Felicity, thank you for coming. I know how difficult this is, but the doctors have made it clear that Lorraine is gone. These papers will allow us to remove the machines and let her pass in peace. As her sister and her healthcare proxy, you need to sign here, and here, and here." He pointed to 3 different signature lines, talking fast, too fast, his finger almost jabbing at the pages. I reached for the pen. My hand was actually touching it when I felt a grip on my wrist. The young nurse, probably in her late 20s with dark curly hair pulled back tight, had appeared seemingly out of nowhere. Her fingers were trembling, but her grip was firm. "Ma'am," she said, her voice barely above a whisper but laced with urgency. "Don't sign anything. Please, just trust me." Her eyes darted to Garrett, then to Jocelyn, and I saw something there. Fear. Real, visceral fear. Garrett's face went red. "Excuse me, Nurse Ilara, but this is a family matter. You're out of line." The nurse, Ilara, according to her badge, didn't let go of my wrist. "I need to speak with Miss Felicity alone. It's regarding her sister's medication schedule." "The medication schedule can wait," Jocelyn snapped, stepping forward. "Mr. Garrett has been through enough without you people interfering." But Ilara stood her ground. "Hospital protocol requires I speak with family members privately about certain matters. It will only take 10 minutes. She looked at me with those pleading eyes. 10 minutes, Miss Felicity, that's all I'm asking." Something in her desperation made me trust her. I set down the pen. "Garrett, I think I need a moment anyway. This is overwhelming. Give me 10 minutes to talk to the nurse, to clear my head, and then I'll sign." I watched Garrett's jaw clench, watched Jocelyn whisper something in his ear, but they couldn't exactly refuse without looking suspicious, so Garrett nodded stiffly. 10 minutes, Felicity, but please, Lorraine's suffering. Every moment we delay is cruel." Ilara practically dragged me out of the room, down a corridor, and into a small consultation room. She locked the door behind us, and I saw her hands were shaking so badly she could barely manage it. "Miss Felicity, I could lose my job for this. I could lose my license, but I can't stand by and watch them murder your sister." The word hit me like a physical blow. "Murder? What are you talking about? The doctor said—" "The doctors don't know what I know," she interrupted. "I've been Lorraine's primary nurse for the past 72 hours. I've watched her neurological responses. Miss Felicity, your sister is not brain dead. She's in a medically induced coma. Her EEG shows activity. Her reflexes are present. 2 days ago, when Mr. Garrett and that woman weren't in the room, I did a sternal rub test. Your sister grimaced. That's a pain response. Brain-dead patients don't respond to pain." My medical training kicked in through the shock, but the doctor's reports are based on assessments done when Mr. Garrett was present, Ilara finished. "I've noticed he always insists on being in the room during neurochecks, and I've seen him talking to Dr. Whitaker, the attending, seen him hand over what looked like an envelope." She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. "Look, I could be wrong. Maybe I'm seeing things that aren't there because I'm young and inexperienced. But 2 nights ago I couldn't sleep, so I came back to check on your sister around 2 a.m. I found Mr. Garrett and that Jocelyn woman alone in the room with Lorraine. The IV bag had been changed, but it wasn't on the schedule I'd prepared. I checked the IV bag afterward. Someone had added additional sedatives way beyond what was prescribed." She showed me photos on her phone, time-stamped. Garrett leaning over Lorraine's IV, Jocelyn standing watch at the door, another photo of the IV bag label showing medications that shouldn't have been there. "I reported it to my supervisor," Ilara continued, her voice cracking. "But Dr. Whitaker said I was mistaken, that he'd ordered the medication change and forgotten to update the chart. He told me if I made accusations again, I'd be terminated for insubordination. But Miss Felicity, I've been checking Lorraine's chart every shift. Someone keeps increasing her sedation just enough to keep her unresponsive, but not enough to kill her outright. They need those papers signed first, need it to look legal. My mind was reeling. Why? Why would Garrett do this? Alara hesitated. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I overheard them talking in the hallway yesterday. That woman, Jocelyn, she's not a grief counselor. She called him baby. They were talking about finally being free and something about a life insurance policy and moving to the Cayman Islands once it's all over. The pieces fell into place with horrible clarity. Lorraine's life insurance, the $3 million policy she'd taken out 5 years ago, the house worth easily $2 million, the investment accounts. My sister had been worth more dead than alive to a man who'd apparently found someone new. Do you have any proof? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Anything that would stand up. Alara bit her lip. Not enough, just my observations, my photos, my word against a doctor and a wealthy man. But Miss Felicity, if you sign those papers, they'll remove life support within the hour, and I believe with the right treatment, with proper sedation reduction, your sister could wake up. Then we need proof, I said, my mind already working. 40 years as an ER nurse had taught me a lot about people, about reading situations, about thinking fast under pressure. And we need it in the next few minutes or Garrett will get suspicious. An idea formed. Risky, possibly illegal, but necessary. Do you have access to the security cameras? Alara nodded slowly. The recordings are kept in the security office, but I'm friends with Corbin, one of the guards. If I told him I needed to review footage for a potential incident report, do it. Pull footage from Lorraine's room for the past 72 hours. Focus on times when Garrett was alone with her or with that Jocelyn woman. And I need you to do something else. I pulled out my phone. I'm going to go back in that room and tell them I'm ready to sign, but I'm going to stall, ask questions, make Garrett explain everything in detail. I want you to have someone review Lorraine's current sedation levels right now, without Dr. Whitaker knowing. Is there another doctor you trust? Dr. Patel, Alara said immediately. He's the head of neurology, and he's not on Dr. Whitaker's service. He's honest, old school. He doesn't tolerate any irregularities. Get him to look at Lorraine now, and Alara, record everything. If Garrett and Jocelyn say anything incriminating while I'm in there, we need it documented. She nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. The room has audio monitoring for patient safety. If I activate it from the nurse's station, everything said in that room will be recorded. Do it. I'll give you 20 minutes instead of 10. Tell Garrett I needed medical clarification about the forms. 20 minutes later, I walked back into Lorraine's room, my heart pounding, but my face composed. Years of keeping calm during codes in the ER served me well. Garrett stood immediately, that false concern plastered on his face. Felicity, finally, are you ready? Almost. I just need to understand a few things first. As a nurse, I need to be sure we're doing the right thing. I watched Garrett's eye twitch. Jocelyn moved closer to him, and I noticed for the first time that she was holding his hand, not hiding it anymore. What is there to understand? Garrett said, an edge creeping into his voice. The doctors have been clear. Lorraine is brain dead. There's no hope. I know that's what Dr. Whitaker said, I replied carefully, pretending to read the documents. But I was wondering about second opinions. Lorraine always said she'd want every option explored. Maybe we should consult with another neurologist before we... There's no time for that, Jocelyn cut in, then caught herself. I mean, what Mr. Garrett means is that it would only prolong the inevitable and cause more suffering. Jocelyn's right, Garrett said quickly. And frankly, Felicity, the costs are mounting. Every day on these machines is costing thousands. Lorraine wouldn't want to drain her estate on futility. There it was, the first slip. He was thinking about her estate, about money. Of course, I said softly. I just want to make sure I understand the medical situation completely. You said brain aneurysm, right? But I've seen aneurysm patients before. Usually there's a CT scan, an angio. I'd love to see Lorraine's imaging, just to understand what happened to my baby sister. Garrett's face was getting redder. The scans were done. They showed massive hemorrhage. Dr. Whitaker has them. I'd still like to see them, I pressed, and I'd like to understand the timeline. She collapsed at home, you said. What was she doing when it happened? She was... Garrett started, then paused. She was upstairs. I heard a thud. What time was this? Around 9 in the morning. And you called 911 immediately? Another pause. Longer this time. Well, I checked on her first, made sure she was breathing. How long before you called? I don't know, Felicity. Maybe 10 minutes? I was in shock. 10 minutes is a long time when someone is having a brain bleed, I said, watching him carefully. Every second counts. Jocelyn squeezed his hand. He did the best he could under terrible circumstances. I'm sure he did, I said. Jocelyn, you've been so supportive. How long have you known Garrett? She blinked, caught off guard. Through the hospital, as I mentioned, as the grief counselor. Which agency are you with? I'd love to send them an accommodation for your dedication. That's not necessary, Garrett said sharply. Felicity, these questions are irrelevant. The only relevant thing is Lorraine's condition, which is hopeless. Now, are you going to sign these papers or not? I looked at my sister lying so still in that bed, the machines breathing for her, monitoring her, keeping her alive despite someone's best efforts to the contrary. I just need one more thing, I said. I want to say goodbye properly, alone, just 5 minutes with my sister, and then I'll sign. We've all said our goodbyes, Garrett protested. Please, I said, letting my voice crack with real emotion. She's the only family I have left, just 5 minutes. He couldn't refuse that without seeming like a monster. Fine, 5 minutes. We'll wait outside. As they left, Garrett whispered something to Jocelyn that I couldn't quite hear, but I saw the way his eyes went to the papers on the bedside table, saw him touch the pen as if to make sure it was still there. The moment they were gone, I went to Lorraine's bedside and took her hand. Hold on, baby girl. I've got you. I've always got you. And then I saw it. The smallest flutter of her eyelids, so subtle it could have been my imagination, but I knew it wasn't. Ilara had been right. Before my 5 minutes were up, Ilara slipped into the room. Dr. Patel reviewed her chart. He's furious. Her sedation levels are 3 times what they should be for a patient in her condition. He's already ordered the medications reduced. And Felicity, we pulled the security footage. She held up a tablet. I watched 72 hours of Garrett's sins play out in fast forward. Him adjusting IV bags when nurses weren't looking, him and Jocelyn kissing in the hallway, him meeting with Dr. Whitaker in a parking garage handing over a thick envelope, and most damningly, footage from the morning Lorraine collapsed, Garrett entering their bedroom at 8 a.m. with a syringe, Lorraine, visible through the doorway, still asleep in bed. 30 minutes later, Garrett calling 911 claiming his wife had just collapsed. He injected her with something. He caused this. Dr. Patel has already called hospital security and the police, Ilara said. They're on their way. But Felicity, Garrett's going to realize something's wrong soon. We need to keep him here. I'll handle it, I said grimly. I walked out to the waiting area where Garrett and Jocelyn stood close together, whispering. When they saw me, they sprang apart, but not quite enough. I'm ready to sign, I said, my voice hollow. Garrett's face lit up with triumph. Thank God, Felicity, you're doing the right thing. Lorraine would be grateful. We walked back into the room together, all 3 of us. I picked up the pen, held it over the first signature line, and then I looked up at Garrett. Before I sign, I just have one question. When did you start planning to kill my sister? The room went silent. Garrett's base drained of color. Jocelyn gasped. What are you talking about? Garrett stammered. Felicity, the grief is making you irrational. Is it? I set down the pen. Is it grief making me notice that you injected Lorraine with something the morning she collapsed, that you've been overdosing her on sedatives to keep her unconscious, that you bribed Dr. Whitaker to falsify her neurological assessments? That's insane, Garrett said, but his voice shook. You have no proof of... Actually, we have quite a bit of proof, said a new voice. Dr. Patel entered the room, followed by 2 police officers and hospital security. Mr. Garrett, I'm Dr. Patel, head of neurology. I've reviewed your wife's case, and I'm appalled. Not only has her care been criminally negligent, but there's clear evidence of deliberate harm. Garrett backed toward the door, but security blocked it. This is ridiculous. I demand to speak to my lawyer. You'll have that opportunity, one of the officers said, pulling out handcuffs. Garrett Thornton, you're under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent. Jocelyn tried to run, but the second officer caught her easily. Jocelyn Morrison, you're also under arrest as an accessory. As they were led away, Garrett screaming about false accusations and Jocelyn sobbing, Dr. Patel turned to me. Ms. Felicity, your sister is being moved to a different unit immediately under my direct care. We're reducing her sedation as we speak. If Nurse Alara's observations are correct, Lorraine may begin to wake up within 24 to 48 hours. I felt my knees go weak, and Alara caught my elbow. She's going to be okay. The next few days will be critical, Dr. Patel said honestly, but yes, I believe she has a real chance at recovery. Thanks to you and Nurse Alara, we caught this in time. I looked at Alara, this brave young woman who'd risked everything to save a patient she barely knew. Thank you, I whispered. You saved my sister's life. She smiled through tears. It's what we're supposed to do, right? First, do no harm. 48 hours later, I was holding Lorraine's hand when her eyes fluttered open. The confusion in them cleared slowly as the last of the sedatives wore off, and then she focused on my face. Felicity. Her voice was raspy, weak, but it was her voice. I'm here, baby girl. I've got you. What? What happened? That's a long story, I said, squeezing her hand, but the short version is that your husband is a monster, and you're going to be just fine. Over the next week, as Lorraine grew stronger, the full scope of Garrett's betrayal came to light. He'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. Jocelyn Morrison was a woman he'd met at a conference a year ago, and they'd been having an affair ever since. When Lorraine mentioned wanting to update her will to leave more to charity, Garrett had panicked. He needed her dead before she could change anything. The injection that morning had been a carefully calculated dose meant to cause a stroke or aneurysm without being obviously poisonous. With Dr. Whitaker's help, bought for $50,000, they'd falsified her medical records to show brain death when she was merely deeply sedated. The life insurance policy would have paid $3 million. The house, the investments, everything would have been Garrett's. He and Jocelyn were already booked flights to the Cayman Islands, scheduled to leave the day after Lorraine's planned death. But instead, Garrett and Jocelyn were both facing 25 years to life for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Dr. Whitaker lost his medical license and faced charges of conspiracy and medical fraud. And Lorraine, against all odds, made a near-complete recovery. 6 months later, I stood beside Lorraine in divorce court. She was thinner, walked with a slight limp that the neurologist said might never fully disappear, but she was alive. The judge granted her everything, every penny, every asset. Garrett would have nothing but his prison cell. As we walked out of the courthouse into the bright sunshine, Lorraine linked her arm through mine. Thank you, she said quietly, for not signing those papers, for trusting your instincts. I think Nurse Alara, I said. She's the real hero. I plan to, Lorraine said. In fact, I'm funding a scholarship in her name at the nursing school for students who show exceptional moral courage. We walked in silence for a moment. Then Lorraine stopped and looked at me. You know what's funny? Garrett thought I was worth more dead than alive, but he was wrong. I'm worth so much more alive. I get to see my nieces graduate. I get to take that trip to Italy. I get to testify against him in court. She smiled, and it was fierce. And I get to live my life knowing that no matter what he tried to take from me, he failed. 3 months after that, Lorraine and I sat on a beach in Positano, Italy, watching the sunset paint the Mediterranean in shades of gold and pink. She'd asked Nurse Alara to join us, and the young woman sat beside us, her first vacation in 2 years. To second chances, Lorraine said, raising her glass of Prosecco. To listening to your gut, I added. To doing the right thing even when it's scary, Alara said. We clinked our glasses together as the sun dipped below the horizon, and I thought about how close we'd come to losing everything. 10 minutes. That's all it had taken. 10 minutes of trusting a stranger's urgent warning. 10 minutes that changed everything. So tell me, have you ever had that moment, that split second where you had to choose between what seemed logical and what your instincts screamed at you? Share your story in the comments below, because you never know who might need to hear it. And if this story moved you, please share it, because somewhere out there, someone might be facing their own 10-minute decision. Let's make sure they make the right one. Thank you for watching. If you want to hear more true stories that will make you think twice about trusting the wrong people, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. I'll see you in the next story. And remember, always trust your instincts. They might just save a life.